shelter.
My name is Laura Zara.
Look at my face.
I'm a survival and backcountry specialist.
Don't fall into that trap.
We just got chased down the mountain by a very angry swarm of bees.
I have a hard time explaining what I do and what my life looks like, but it's way easier to just show you.
Whew. Jawbone of another elk to get the ivory out. It's just not the best spot to be.
Learn what it takes to become decivilized. Let's imagine worst case scenario. You got turned around, or it's getting dark, it's getting late, it's getting cold, and maybe it's raining like today. You have to spend the night out in whatever wild place you're in. What are you gonna do? The first thing that's gonna kill you in this situation is hypothermia. If you get cold and it comes into night, you don't have a fire, you don't have a place to stay dry, you're in a bad spot. So building a shelter is completely vital. If you do not have your oh shit bag, if you do not have that little emergency blanket to make a shelter, what do? How do you make a shelter? How do you stay out of the elements, and how do you stay warm for a whole night? Building a shelter out of natural materials is pretty simple and also time consuming. So you need to get started right away. Don't wait until dark. As soon as you know you're in that situation, start looking and start building. You can build a shelter out of whatever debris you have, whatever environment you're in, whether it's grass, leaves, any kind of debris. The idea is to create a space where there's enough material above you that the rain is diverted from pouring down on you. If you've ever stood under a thick tree canopy, you know it takes a few minutes of raining before it starts to drip down on you. The idea is to create an artificial canopy from natural materials above you so that as the rain hits it, it gets diverted slightly before it hits another piece of debris, gets diverted slightly, and eventually it creates this space of dryness. Sometimes you can find a tree that's fallen or some other kind of pre-existing natural structure that's making a dry space you can take advantage of. You can build that out even more to create a bigger dry space and save yourself a ton of time and energy. It's worth spending the extra time to explore the area you're in. Don't waste your entire night trying to find something perfect, but if it's raining out, look for an area that is still dry despite the fact that it's raining. This is an area that naturally already has some protection that you can take advantage of. I noticed that this, along and under this tree, it's dry ground despite everything else being wet. And when I come to the thickest part of the tree, there's like a natural little hollow here. It's not big, but I can work with it. It has some holes in the side that I can kind of patch up, and I can create a floor. The bigger the structure is, the more work you're gonna have to take to not only heat that thing, but to make it all entirely a dry space. So the smaller, the better. We like to think of how great it would be to have this big space, but really all you need to do is get in there and sleep. And the smaller it is, the more it's gonna be able to radiate your own body heat back on you. So some big space is actually more of a liability than a help. So I'm gonna take whatever I can find, whether it's pieces of bark, sticks, piles of grass and debris, anything to plug up those holes and cover those spaces. It's really reminiscent of making forts when you're a kid. It's essentially what you're doing, it's just making a fort. There's four main ways that you lose heat. It is through convection, conduction, radiation, and evaporation. Conduction is one of the biggest ways that you lose heat, and that is when your body is touching something that's cold. You have a heat transfer that goes from your body into the ground. The ground is colder, so it goes from your hot body into the cold ground. You're never going to be able to produce enough body heat to heat up in space as big as, the entire Earth. So having a layer in between the ground and you is really, really, really important. And a way I accomplish that is by using grass. It's a great insulator. You can use leaves, something that is preferably dry, but if it's not dry, it's not the end of the world. Your body heat is going to be able to dry that out. And having that layer that will prevent you from having the ground just be a giant heat suck is really, really important. I like to think of whatever space, whatever shelter I'm making as like a nest. I try to picture like a squirrel's nest or a mouse nest. something where it's basically a ball of insulation that you're climbing into the center of. So I'm gonna line the entire outside of my shelter with grass, just trying to stuff in the spaces that not only is going to create an extra layer of waterproofing, weatherproofing, it's gonna create some warmth and heat reflection as well. Convection is another main way that you're going to be losing heat, and that is when you have a breeze on you. It's basically stripping your heat away from your body. So creating a wind block and being in a place where you're not going to have wind ripping right through is going to allow you to hang on to whatever heat you are able to generate yourself. It's also nice to think about having a space near your shelter where you can have a fire. So if I'm creating a fire here, not only am I sheltered from the wind, but I'm gonna be able to actually have my shelter be sort of a heat reflector or a heat catch. So the heat from that fire is actually gonna move into my shelter and kind of bounce off of me and that back wall. So I'm not just gonna have to be like a rotisserie chicken turning in front of the fire to stay warm. I'm actually gonna be able to heat the shelter and stay warm in there. Taking hot rocks from inside the fire, letting them heat up in the fire and bringing them into your shelter, burying them underneath a little bit of dirt or debris is also going to create some heat that you can use. It heats up the ground, it allows you to kind of cuddle up to it. If you have another extra piece of clothing or something you can wrap it in, make sure you don't burn yourself on it, but especially if my feet have been wet, I get a hot rock and then put my feet on it. I always call it my penguin rock. I feel like a penguin with an egg at my feet. That's what I do. So get your penguin rock, bring it into your shelter. Being wet is definitely gonna cause you to lose heat. You're losing heat through the process of evaporation. So it can be through sweat, or if it's raining and you're already wet. Trying to get dry is sometimes really hard. So that might be a situation where having a fire is gonna help you, but you definitely don't want all of the ways of losing heat working against you. So if you're already wet, you have to make sure that you're preventing yourself from losing heat through either conduction or convection, or any heat that you are radiating is being kept inside. Being wet can be tough, but it's not an end game. And if you can't get dry, you just need to focus on what you can control, which is containing whatever heat you are able to create. Another technique I really like to use is making a grass mat. A lot of times if you're trying to sleep on a pile of grass and debris, it can get really compressed and it can also just spread out. And then as the night goes on, you get closer and closer and closer to the ground and you get colder and colder. Unfortunately, as the night is also getting colder. So there's a really simple method, and you can use this with basically any kind of fiber, from cattails to grass to palm fronds, something ideally that's long. Basically, I'm taking these bundles of grass, and these are pretty long, so I can actually fold them about the same length and the same width, and you want them to be about the same diameter. So add grass until you have whatever you're looking for. Kind of fold all the ends in, and then take another piece of grass to use as a lashing, and you're wrapping it around your bundle and tying it together. Whatever kind of knot you can make that works. An overhand knot, a square knot. And you're just gonna keep taking pieces of grass and keep knotting it up until you have a bundle. You're gonna make several of these, and you're putting them next to each other, and then taking another piece of grass and tying them together. You basically just keep continuing this process until you have a mat that is going to be long enough. You don't need it to be as big as your whole body. You really just want it to be long enough that you can either curl up on top of it in the fetal position, or just so that you can keep the core of your body from being out of contact with the ground. If you're going to be out there for a long time, hey, maybe you have time to make something that is that long. Right now it's more of a pillow size, but even if I doubled that, it would be enough for me to sit on and keep my core off the ground. So it's a really easy way to have a pretty thick insulated pad to sleep on and You're also super comfy with it there. So there's an added bonus. If I got like an armload more of grass and shoved it over me like a blanket, I would probably be sweating right now. It's unbelievable. Like, I'm wet, the grass is wet, but it's reflecting all of my heat back on me, and I would not need a fire right now. Now, when the sun sets, probably. That would be really nice. Plus, it would create some serious ambiance, which would be cool. I might have to come sleep here. If you aren't lucky enough to find some kind of pre-existing shelter, make a debris shelter. It is more work, but it's totally doable. If you can find some kind of a sturdy log that's stuck in trees, that is ideal. If not, it's not really a big deal to have to find a log and prop it up on something, whether you're wedging it in between two trees, two rocks, whatever, somewhere that it's gonna be stable and create some kind of an incline. So finding this, I'm going to have the main ridge pole, which is kind of like a spine, and I want to add a bunch of ribs to the outside of that. That's going to be so that I can pile a bunch of leaves and debris on it, and basically I'm creating a skeleton to support a bunch of leaves and debris that are going to be my insulation. I'm getting rid of the sticks that are under it because I'm going to add an insulated pad, a bunch of grass, some other maybe pine boughs, something to keep me elevated off the ground, but I want to know what I'm working with and make sure that it's going to be big enough for me to put my body into. So I'm kind of clearing stuff out so I can slide in there and see how long I need to make this thing. If I build it to about here, an arm's length, then I know that my head will stay dry and warm. You're going to need to add about 3 to 4 feet of debris on top of this thing to make it waterproof. So you're always trying to think bigger, but the inside space itself is pretty small. You want branchy branches. May create more for the debris to hang on to. Now we are truly fort building. Like, let's say I just had this stick. If it curves in like that, then I'm losing space where my body's gonna go. So if I'm worried that the space is gonna be too big in there, maybe you wanna use it to your advantage. Generally, I try to keep sticks like this, I try to prevent them from curving inward. I try to let the tops of the branches that I'm adding be higher than I want the actual shelter to be, because as you're throwing armloads of leaves on here, they're gonna wanna start to kind of pour off, but if you have kind of some sticks sticking up in the center, it's gonna create more of a space for those leaves to settle in so that you don't just have 3 feet of debris on the very outsides, and where you need it most at the very top, there's only 4 leaves that'll stick there. You wanna make sure you're creating a space that's like, wants to catch stuff. If the rain lands on a leaf, that leaf is gonna support water until it can't anymore, drip onto a next leaf, and then that leaf is gonna drip onto another leaf. The more of a volume of leaves you have, the more effective it's gonna be, and the more chances there are that the leaves are gonna drip on other leaves and not down through the shelter onto you. Grass is really great to add to shelters because when you have a drop of rain that lands on grass, it's gonna wanna naturally follow that grass all the way to the end and drip off the end. So you actually need less material if you're using really long strands of grass. You wanna think about when you're using grass, laying it like shingles, so that when all the droplets of water come off of these grass blades, they land on the second shingle and get carried off the end. So on the top, I would try to bend my grass in half, and then underneath that, I would layer a shingle. It's really important that you don't do it the other way around, because then the grass is just diverting that water right into your shelter. I just kind of bend over, use my hands as a rake, scoop everything I can into a pile. Then when you have a pile, you really just, oh, there's a spider right there. You are living in a place where there's venomous spiders, be careful. That's a lot of work for a tiny little pile of leaves. I need about 10,000 times this. But that's a start. Another tip that I sometimes use is taking off my jacket. and I'll flip it inside out if it's a rain jacket, because I'm gonna stuff this thing full of wet leaves and use it to create kind of a scarecrow, but then I'm gonna dump the contents of the scarecrow onto my shelter. Wow, this got really dark all of a sudden. Now, after only 99 more trips, I'll have a shelter. My other shelter was completed in the same amount of time it took for me to just get a basic start to this one. I still have hours of work left. Luckily, it took so long, the sun came out, so I think I'll be fine. If you bring a rake on your outdoor excursion and you find yourself in a situation, it makes things a lot easier to make a debris shelter. If you don't, then try to find a pre-existing shelter and maybe just bring your O-ship bag so that you have that emergency tarp that you can use instead. I'm actually really hot right now. Good night.